back. Today, I want to welcome Dave Kellett and Beth Reidmiller in studio. So before I properly introduce them to you guys, I just want to let you guys know a little bit about them. Dave is the Reuben Award-winning cartoonist behind the all-age comic Sheldon and the sci-fi humor strip Drive. He is also the co-director of the documentary film Stripped, which brings together cartoonists from all eras as they discuss the art form. Dave is also the co-host of podcast Comic Lab, which gives advice to cartoonists all over who are looking to get into comics and how to living off of it. Hi, you guys. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having us.
Hey, welcome back. And real quick, I just want to mention Beth Reidmiller. You weren't here last time. You're the cartoonist, the colorist who worked with Dave, correct?
Yeah, he's colorblind, so...
The one downside about being a colorblind cartoonist, you work great black and white, but then as soon as you go to color, people are like, hey, interesting choice on the purple sky. And so Beth saves my bacon day in, day out.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you're like the team.
Yeah, Beth,
the dream team.
Beth has been amazing. Like she's been in the studio now for 2 years, and we produce, like you said, Sheldon and Drive and a bunch of other projects. And she helps out with the books, with the merch, the product designs, all that stuff. It's been amazing to have her. Yeah.
You're like a super colorist.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You do it all.
That is the super skill. Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. So what have you been up to since the last time you visited us?
So it's been a while since I've been here. A lot of projects. New books have come out. We're about to launch another book coming. Another possible video project on comics coming down the pipe that I can't quite announce yet, but I can tease it. So it's been a busy, good couple of months, couple of years there. It's been good.
Yeah, amazing. We actually have a book right here if you want to talk about it.
Sure. Yeah, this one is the most recent one that came out. This is pop culture, and it's so titled because it's all the comics I've ever done on Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, DC, Marvel, and it's kind of perfect for the Sideshow crowd because it's right in that wheelhouse. It's basically every nerdy, geeky joke I've ever done in one full-color book. And
amazing.
It came out awesome. We're really proud of it and how it came out, so it's great.
And actually, with this book, you are going to be joining us in the Facebook group later on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that.
And you're going to be looking at, from what I'm seeing, the Advanced Suit Spider-Man?
Yes, if you want to see me revert to being a 9-year-old boy, tune in because that will be very exciting.
It sounds like fun, and you guys should totally tune in because this book will be one of the giveaways.
Yes, absolutely. Right? I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Yay. Awesome. And for Beth, what made you pursue a career as a colorist?
I kind of fell into it. I went to school for art and was doing fine art and illustration and stuff and had been a fan of Dave's for a long time. And I think because of Twitter and meeting him at cons and stuff, he emailed me one time. I was like, "Hey, you want to try coloring?"
What? Is that how you? Is that the story how you met?
Yeah, it's one of those rare stories where a reader becomes part of the production process. I guess
it's not normal.
Yeah, it's not the normal way you would do it. But no, the truth
me.
is, Beth had been. I do a convention up in Seattle called Emerald City Comic Con, which I'm sure a lot of people know. And Beth would come up and slowly be like, "Oh, so what are over the years you go? So what kind of art do you do?" And you showed me one year your art.
You asked.
I
never.
Far better than any art that I've ever produced. And I was like, wow, you've really got talent. And then when my last assistant left, I don't remember how we reached out, but I said like, hey, if you're still interested.
Oh God, internet's amazing.
I know, right? And I was like, I've been reading your comics for like 12 years. Like, I don't know what to do right now.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
and it's worked out great because we have. It's important when you're working in comics to have people that have similar senses of humor and sensibilities, and it's been a really nice mesh. So it's worked out great. Yeah.
That's so great. Look at that.
I know.
Who knew?
And like I had been like the day jobs, I'd been like an admin and like production and stuff like that. So I was like, yeah, I can do your spreadsheets. Let's do this. So
that's why you're so good at
and
the
as a cartoonist, anybody
too.
that could even remotely do numbers,
you
you're like, you take that.
Without knowing like a total bonus. She's like the package deal. She's
yeah,
colors
exactly.
and she
can do Excel. So that's
Excel is not easy because I do that too. It's when you like mess up on a formula, it's all done and you have all.
It all cascades down into that.
You're just like, why is everything?
A lot of people like, why isn't this working? You're like, aha.
Exactly.
So it's really fun, and so that's why we got another book that will be kickstarting in like 2 weeks that Beth's putting the finishing touches on now, and that one's going to be all about making fun of different authors in history. So that'll be fun. So it's been a fun 2 years in the studio. It's been really good.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
The last time you were here, we talked about your documentary.
Stripped. Yeah.
Can you talk about and think back to some of the interviews because you had so many interviews? Some of the most fun, memorable interviews.
Yes. So for me, growing up, the big titans of cartooning were sort of the Mort Walker does Beetle Bailey, Bill Watterson does Calvin and Hobbes. And going into the Peanut studio where Charles Schultz worked was amazing. Getting to interact with Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes was amazing.
Yeah.
Getting to go to Mort Walker's studio which is the original home of, I'm going to mispronounce his name, the guy that did Mount Rushmore, Gutzon Borglum, I think was his name. But he carved this house out of living stone, and that's where Mort Walker lives now. Like, you walk in, and it's like if you turned a gigantic 7,000-ton boulder into a house, that's what that house looks like.
What in the
oh, wow, this is
world?
like not normal to have this kind of house.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really fun. So just being able to talk to like my childhood heroes was the best part. But then also getting to talk to my peers, because we interviewed everybody from their 20s to their 80s and talking, and they all had a shared love of comics and cartooning. And it was really kind of a special and fun project to work on for that reason. Yeah, it was really awesome.
And through the process of making this documentary, do you have any fun memories or stories that you can tell us?
All sorts of fun memories.
Top 5.
My favorite, and my co-director Fred Schroeder loves to remind me of this, is that we went to go interview Greg Evans of Luann comic strip fame. I don't know if you know Luann, but he lives in a very warm spot in California, I'll just say that. And I left an In-N-Out milkshake in the dashboard of my car. We went in and did like 6 hours of interviews. I came back out, I'm like, ooh, I forgot about my milkshake. I'm going to dive right into that. He's like, no. And I just dove right into that milkshake like a dummy, like a big dummy.
Dave, no.
And then I went like, about half an hour from home, like, I'm going to try one more time. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you going back in? Leave it alone. So we have a lot of food-related jokes from 3 or 4 years of filming that movie. So that was a weird memory to bring out. I don't know why I brought that one. But no, it's just the most fun for me was when Bill Watterson got involved with the documentary of Calvin and Hobbes. And after he'd done the interview and after he'd watched an early cut of the film, I said super humbly, like, hey, would you ever maybe kind of possibly consider doing the poster for the film? And he said, I would love to. It'd be the first cartoon that I've done in, 15 years, 18 years at that point?
Oh my gosh.
And so he sent the artwork, but he mailed it just in a manila envelope. No cardboard backing, no plastic. Just an original Bill Watterson piece of art in a manila envelope.
No production.
Send it to California. And I was like, Bill, what are you doing?
Was it okay?
Yes, thank God it was all right. But
bonus to your postman.
I sent it back to him like quadruple wrapped, styrofoam in a box carried by elephants, hand delivered. But I love that he had sent it. It was so generous of him to do it. And then it also kind of speaks to his humility as an artist, where he's like, this is fine, just a manila envelope, doesn't deserve more than that, and he sent it along. So that was probably one of the highlights of the film, though.
Oh my gosh.
Interacting with him. He was great.
I can't believe you just mail such an important art piece.
I know, literally.
Didn't think about it. Just
Bill,
like,
that could pay for my kids' college. Don't put that in a
his
manila
artwork
envelope like
goes
that.
for so much on
So
auctions.
much.
So like that was.
He's just kind of like, oh, by the way, I just sent it, no production needed.
Yeah,
Thanks.
exactly. I'm just gonna. It's got a
my
32-cent stamp on it. That's fine. That's all you need. But so the film came out great, and actually that we enjoyed that process so much that we have, and I don't want to tease too much about it, but we have an upcoming project that we're going to do because we loved basically sitting and talking with cartoonists about the craft that they love so much, that we're going to do another project, and I won't say more than that, about interviewing cartoonists. So knock on wood, that'll be announced soon. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little earlier that you're colorblind.
I am, yeah.
So my question is for Beth, what is it like to work with Dave on a daily basis when you color for him?
Oh, so much freedom.
You really just whatever you want.
He's like, I was like, what do you think? He's like, I don't know. So it's great. I mean, yeah, that's the wonderful thing is like Dave's not like really that picky about it. He's like, I trust you, go and do it. So it's great. It's super fun.
Well, also like I think we try to do, and this is true for both of us, is that. But for me especially, you try to hire someone that's as good or better than you, and then give them the freedom to do what they want to do. That way, you have a personal investment in it and enjoy it. So
and every now and then he'll be like, "Oh, I was kind of imagining this," and be like, "All right, sure."
Yeah, and sometimes, exactly. There's sometimes subjective choices that are parallel, but Beth is amazing and absolutely elevates every cartoon that she colors. It's
so amazing.
But also on Drive, it's all just shades of blue.
Oh, okay.
So it's a monochrome color story. So it's more just coloring in tones. And so every now and then we'll be like, oh, I thought about this. Oh, but I actually thought that. So that drives a little more his vision.
Yeah, I kind of like that it does open the conversation for freedom and discussion and kind of great, better artwork I feel can be born from something like that than just like hard set rules of X, Y, Z.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and for cartooning, which is a career that's kind of siloed in that you're working for 99% of your career, you're working by yourself at your desk, and it's kind of fun for me for friends that are either actors or filmmakers or work on stage or theater where it's more collaborative and there's the give and take. It's fun for me now in kind of a later stage of my career to go, here's a thing, and then she hands back and she goes, here's a very different thing, and it's fun to see that collaboration where. And we've slowly developed a language of like what I'll draw to let her do a certain thing that I know she's good at, and she will sometimes color a comic in a way that highlights something that the art never could have done in black and white. And it's a nice dance. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so great teamwork.
Yeah, it's fun.
So Dave, recently Jim Davis sold Paul's Incorporated.
Yeah, sold Garfield basically.
Yeah, the rights to Garfield to Viacom. So as an independent cartoonist, what does that headline mean to you?
Well, there's a lot. So first of all, we interviewed Jim Davis in Indiana. He's got pauses out in the middle of nowhere in like you literally are cresting a hill as a Californian, and you're trusting your GPS, and you're like, I'm in the middle of a soy field. There's nothing out here, and then you crest a hill. It's like this giant 14-story building, not 14 stories, but it's very big in the middle of nowhere. And he had 65 employees working on Garfield there. And I was always impressed with him in kind of a Walt Disney way that someone could take a comic strip and build a whole empire out of it. And so he gets a lot of grief, and I understand why that grief is given. But I think I always kind of respected him for what he was able to build with Garfield. Yeah. And for me, it's kind of the end of an era of newspaper comics because nothing will ever come this way again that's that big with comic strips. I mean, Garfield was billions of income, and I think he's just reached an age where he wants to pass it along. And I personally, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
It is interesting. I mean, we're just in the age of licensing, and everything is now a universe. So, like, sure, he's handing on Garfield to a new generation. So, and I think Garfield does get a lot of flack nowadays, but it's made for kids. Like, young kids love Garfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
Young kids think it's hilarious, and so that's great. So, bring it to a new animated generation that are watching stuff on Netflix stuff. Like, why not?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of nice too that an artist, and this is not a morbid thought, but as you get towards the end of your life, it's nice to be able to pass it off in a way that you're comfortable with. So I'm happy that he found a way to pass it along. So it's an interesting time though, because it definitely is
passing the torch,
the end of an era for those newspaper comics, because that's the last big hurrah.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. We were talking before, we jumped into the segment of where I'm originally from, which is Taiwan. So learning English was kind of an obstacle I had to overcome, and it was through newspaper comics.
Yeah,
a lot of it.
That's true for a lot of folks.
Because it was entertaining, so it wasn't just like reading a textbook of only letters and words, and it was like pictures, and you kind of as a kid understand. So like Garfield, Kathy, like all of those have a very special meaning to me.
Yeah. So as a cartoonist, one of the things, and as a parent, one of the emails that comes in kind of frequently that means the most to me is like, I have a really reluctant reader in my house. It's my 6-year-old, my 5-year-old, my 7-year-old. And your comics have helped encourage him or her to really start reading. And that means a lot as a cartoonist and a dad. That you can, because I know what that's like when you're trying to get a kid to read, and there's the thing that sparks it. You're like, thank you, author, or thank you, piece of work. Yeah, I'll buy you all these books. You can have
like early grade comics and middle grade comics. They're big right now. It's a big thing. So it's like, sure, expand that world. Why not?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like Garfield had always been on the merchandising train. So like, it's not like he's selling out at the end of his life. Like it's just the next step. So.
Can I tell you a fun Jim Davis story real quick?
Please do.
So Fred and I were touring the Paws studio, and we walked into the merch room, which is like all the licensed Garfield stuff in the studio. And it was about the size of 2 high school basketball gymnasiums, or maybe 1.5, right? I don't want to overdo it. And we walk in, and it's all products on shelves displayed as though it's a massive Garfield store.
Oh my gosh.
And I go, wow, Jim, good for you. This is every Garfield product ever created. And he kind of puts his hand on my shoulder, and he goes, oh, David, this is this year. And I was like, oh!
And just like that, mic drop.
Yeah, just like, I'll be downstairs having an espresso, thanks very much. Just, you keep, but it was great to look at like Funyuns in like Magyar, it was like Budapest of Funyuns with Garfield on them, and it was like the weirdest collection of products from all over the world. It's amazing.
That's just this year's though.
Yeah, just this year's, but here's Garfield toothpaste from Japan if you want some. So it's great.
Amazing.
It was really cool though.
Oh my goodness. So before we move on to our fan questions, final question posing to the both of you. How do you let your geek side show?
Oh my gosh.
Oh man.
I mean.
Do you want to go first?
Loaded question.
I mean, it's not like I hide it.
Well, you and your husband just had a D&D game this weekend, right?
Yeah, my husband and I play in D&D a lot. He DMs we have 2 different friend groups to do it, and then he plays in other game stuff. So he knows this, so this isn't like spoiling a secret. But I think I'm going to make him a personalized D&D screen for some holiday. Although it's hard to make it a surprise because like living together, you can't just like work on like a 40-hour piece without him knowing.
Yeah, he's gonna
so I told him, I was
on?
like, I think I'm gonna do this. He's like, oh my gosh. So yeah, that's probably the most currently. But,
What's your character?
so I play 2 different characters. I play a halfling wizard named Uma Kachuli. So when it's spelled, that says actually, because she's a total know-it-all. So she's fun. And then my other one
so much.
is a Goliath fighter named Benny, and she does not think, she just punches, and it's very fun.
Amazing.
So 2 very different characters.
That's delightful.
I love
That's
it.
delightful. But as a cartoonist, like 99% of my life is me geeking out. So like the fact that I get to do comic strips like this book that makes fun of Star Trek and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and DC and Marvel and all that sort of stuff, like every childhood nerddom that I dove into, it's awesome. I love being able to make fun of all of them. It's great. So
I mean, we always in the studio are always like, oh, did you see the whatever insert
and start just drawing like a little doodles.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be 2 nerds in a studio because you're just talking
we
geek
always,
shop all day
watch
long.
the newest trailers.
It's like you're not working.
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. Yeah, it's great.
Let's go ahead and jump into some of our live fan questions.
Sure.
This one comes from Grand Knight Grizz, who writes to Dave, do you still read other webcomics? And if so, what are some of your favorites?
Ooh, do I still read some web? Absolutely. So some of my old favorites are still on the docket. So I still love Brad Geiger's Evil Inc. I still love Chris Straub's Chainsaw Suit, and I love Brood Hollow. They're both delightful. Scott Kurtz's PvP I love. In fact, Space Trawler, another sci-fi strip like my comic strip Drive, is delightful and humorous and wonderful. So it's not as much as I used to when I was in my 20s before I had kids, when the time was endless, you know. But now it's limited down to a more tight core of comics. But what do you read of webcomics these days?
I honestly don't read that many just because time. Again, I don't have kids, but
I
use my time also. But my forever favorite will always be Carl Kerschel's Abominable.
Carl Kerschel is great.
So good. He draws how I want to draw. So I adore it. And it's also just a really sweet, wonderful story.
Yeah, but I will say this though, for anyone interested in trying out new webcomics or that want to dive into comics on the web, a really good starter point is a website called Fleen, FLEEN.com, and they have a whole listing on the right side of the webpage that has, 100 webcomics
many of them,
that are really great and nicely curated, and it's a great jumping off point for anyone interested in jumping into webcomics. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Little baby step into the the world.
But thank you for that question. That's great.
Hi, Gary.
Yay! Our next question is for Beth, and it comes from Alex, who writes, who is the biggest colorist influence on your career?
Oh my gosh. I am terrible at remembering names, and
so this is going to be a great answer.
But no, Matt Hollingsworth, he colors a ton of comics, and he's incredible.
Yeah.
He does a really interesting, and he probably works really closely with the ink artist, I would assume, but he does really interesting like layering over ink and working like it all in, so it's not just black on top of color. He's incredible. And then and now I am forgetting the name of the colorist. It might be Matt. Now I'm like, they're all mixing in my head. But the guy who colored Matt Fraction's Hawkeye is incredible, and it might be Matt Hollingsworth, and I can't remember. But I think in the first trade he did a whole layout about how his process, and he took all the thumbnails of all the pages and did just a broad color of all of them at once, so they all blend into each other. He's incredible.
That's incredible.
And I will chime in just to say, even as a colorblind person, I always like Fiona Staples on Saga. Yeah. Her ability to create shape and depth and size with color, no line art involved, but just.
Does she color that?
I believe she does her own coloring. Yeah, she's amazing. But yeah, that's also great. But yeah, that's a fun question too. Thank you.
Hey. Our next question comes from Joe, and this is for the both of you.
Okay.
Important question: what is the best breakfast cereal and cartoon pairing?
Joe, you've stumped us. All right, well, so first of all, just hands down, and I don't think anyone in the room would fight this. I think Captain Crunch is a solid choice.
I would fight you.
What would your choice?
Fruit Loops, hands down.
Fruit Loops is what you get when you check into a hotel and it comes with a breakfast.
Yeah.
There's Fruit Loops, and it's the thing that you grind and it fills your bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I ate so many Fruit Loops in college when I just needed to study and just needed to eat while you're studying. I just bowl of Fruit Loops.
Wow.
Big fan.
Well, we're done. Anyway, this has been the end of our employment here today.
I will say Fruit Loops the '90s X-Men comic.
Oh, the
Ooh.
90s X-Men comic. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I'm going to say Captain Crunch and a really solid episode of Thundercats. That's what I'm going to say.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's my childhood in a nutshell
Crunching
right
with
there.
Thundercats.
Yeah, crunching with the Thundercats, just snarfing away.
Oh my gosh, I love this.
So yeah, that's. Thank you for the weird question. That was fun.
Okay, little changing things up a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly.
Our next question comes from Robert, and this is also for the both of you. What is your favorite 80s cartoon?
Oh, 80s cartoon. That's going back a ways. So the 80s were filled with like weird licensed comics where you'd be like, suddenly you'd have Q*bert, right? And Pac-Man. And did G.I. Joe start in the 80s? I guess it did, right?
I think it's early 90s, right?
Early 90s? Well,
I don't remember.
so for me, the 1-2 punch was G.I. Joe and Transformers. That might not be 80s. That might be 90s. But I loved those two. They were both ridiculous. I loved how the censors, either on the brand side or on the content side, said when G.I. Joe, when somebody shoots somebody at a ship, they always had to show a parachute coming out of the ship. I don't know if you saw
Yes,
that.
that's
So like no one ever died on G.I. Joe. Like literally it was like an A-bomb coming in. They're like, oh, we're all parachuting out. We're safe. But that would be my favorite. So what was your...
So I'm gonna.
You were
play
not a child of the 80s and 90s.
Well, I was born in the 80s. I'm gonna play the fifth because I was born in the 80s, but we didn't really have a lot of TV growing up, so I don't have a strong.
Oh, really?
Foundation of cartoons, unfortunately.
Not even like a terrible one like the Snorks or anything? Or
Oh, I mean.
do you remember the Snorks? Did you ever see the
I don't
Snorks?
think I remember
They were the Smurfs underwater.
What?
It was a
Wait, is this a
weird
real
and
thing?
it was a weird and terrible idea. Everyone look for YouTube for a trailer of
Was
the
it on
Snorks.
TV?
It was on TV. It shouldn't have been,
Snorks.
but it was on
I remember
TV.
Smurfs.
Yeah.
Smurfs, yeah,
Snorks.
beautiful European
Underwater.
tradition, but Snorks is like, let's put them underwater. Let's take the Smurfs and put them
yeah.
I will
underwater. That's
say
what
Fraggle Rock. I do. I don't know if that was
Fraggle
English
oh,
or
but that was
not.
HBO, wasn't it?
HBO.
Oh, really?
Wasn't
It's the
Fraggle on
puppet show.
I think
HBO?
PBS
The puppets,
ran 'em.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, did
Yeah,
they?
Fraggle Rock.
Yeah.
I thought HBO.
I
Well,
don't
anyway.
know.
Oh, I don't remember.
I like that the
but-
No TV fan was like, give the kids HBO. That's fine. That's,
Yeah, I mean,
Premium
like
quality.
Muppets always, like, yeah, Muppet
Yeah.
stuff was always.
oh yeah, the
totally cleared
Muppets.
out. Yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah,
Yeah, the Muppets.
In fact,
Christmas
it's
shows
one of the nicest compliments people ever give me about Sheldon, this comic strip, is that it reminds them humor-wise of the Muppets, because that's that kind of joy and optimism
Yeah.
that Henson had,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's actually I
Yeah,
might
Muppets
say
are-
Muppets doesn't qualify as a comic, but
Yeah, I mean, the
cartoon,
Muppet
rather?
movies always will
Yeah.
be forever. And
Those are
Muppet,
great.
The Great Muppet Caper.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Perfect.
yes.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
Happiness Hotel. But thank you for that question. That was a fun one.
Yay! And the next one comes from Alex. And have either of you read Garfield minus Garfield?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And I put Jim Davis on a pedestal over the fact that he saw it and he allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
He
Yep.
said, let it go forward. And I think that's great. Because, like,
Yeah.
if that was a different kind of a company or a different kind of an artist, they would have shut it down. And Jim Davis didn't. He thought it was delightful. And I think that,
Yeah,
to
and
his credit, that's
it
awesome.
brings like this wonderful existential.
Dread of,
weird-
like,
yeah, it's
sadness
like-
and dread. And
It's so good. It totally, yeah, it takes an existing thing and makes it a new thing by subtracting a thing. It's great. I think it's
great,
It's
yeah.
hilarious and wonderful, and yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And what a high compliment when someone, like,
Yeah.
takes your art and basically memifies it into a whole
Yeah.
thing. That's
I
delightful.
think
but
it's,
yeah,
if, it's, if it's good and it, you have like good intention
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's,
yeah.
it's in good sport and all that stuff. Like I
Yeah.
think
it does feel like any other creation, though, the creator would shut that down quickly. So yeah, good on.
I think it
Jim
really
Davis for, like-
depends on the person and that kind of speaks to Jim's character.
Yeah,
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 absolutely. It's very
absolutely.
funny.
Yeah, that's fun.
Okay, you guys ready for the final fan question?
Ooh,
Oh, final
boy,
fan
let's
question.
do it.
All right, let's
This
do
one
it.
comes from Anne-Marie, who writes, favorite comic strip growing up and favorite now.
Ooh, wow, that's a good one.
Spot.
Well, favorite one now, the one I enjoy reading the most right now, is probably not actually a comic strip. Saga from Brian and Fiona Staples is amazing. I'm really enjoying that as a story, as the way they're laying it out, how beautiful it is. I know that's not satisfying that it's not a comic strip, but that one happens to be my favorite comic. And then as a kid, it was kind of the triumvirate of me of either The Far Side or Bloom County or Calvin Hobbes. So that's what made it so special to be able to interact with Bill Watterson, because Calvin Hobbes was so fun. But how about you?
I always really like Sherman's Lagoon and Mutts.
Yeah, Sherman's Lagoon.
Mutts is great too because there's a dog. Love dogs. And then currently, I'm really enjoying again Carl Kerschel's Isola. Not a strip, I know. There's just
Yeah.
not many like strips anymore that are.
But that one was up for
Yeah.
3 Eisners this year, so
it's
that's also a good recommendation.
beautiful,
Yeah.
highly suggested. But yeah, I mean read comics on the floor like every other kid, so that it is a little sad that like newspapers are not
I know.
what they used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's a renaissance. You know how things go.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Bring paper back.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank you
for answering all
for
the
having
fan
us.
questions.
Hey, did you like that video? Be sure to subscribe by clicking the S icon on your screen and click that bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is posted. If you'd like more info on the items featured in this video, click the link provided under Product Info. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to let your geek side show.